They say you can see danger in someone's eyes, but the real monsters, they smile. Talk with Psychopaths and Savages begins where charm meets danger, where every smile hides intent and every word tests how far empathy can reach before it breaks. This isn't just a story about darkness, it's about what happens when you try to understand it.
Chapter 1. The Smile Behind the Eyes. You can tell a lot about a person from their smile, but the ones who wear it too long, too perfectly, are the ones who make you uneasy. Psychopaths aren't monsters from stories. They blend in, mimic emotion, and study the people around them with quiet precision. When the narrator meets Daniel, a calm and calculating man in a maximum security facility, his charm is disarming rather than frightening. That's the danger. The ordinary face hiding extraordinary detachment. This opening chapter sets the tone for a journey into the psychology of manipulation and control, where understanding comes at the cost of proximity, and every truth revealed might only be another layer of deception.
Chapter 2. The Interview Room. Inside the stark, windowless interview room, everything is designed to strip away comfort. No distractions, no sense of time, just space for truth or manipulation to unfold. The narrator faces Daniel across a plain table, a man whose calm demeanor feels more like rehearsal than honesty. When asked about his past, Daniel's answers are composed, revealing not emotion, but performance. His words and expressions are tools, each smile, each pause, carefully calculated. The conversation becomes a quiet test of control, where empathy can be mistaken for weakness, and silence becomes a strategy. By the end, it's clear that understanding Daniel isn't about what he says, but about the patterns behind every carefully measured word.
Chapter 3. The Slip. Every interview follows a pattern. Questions, pauses, careful control. But sometimes, a single word breaks the rhythm. During the second meeting, when Daniel speaks about control, his composure falters. For a brief moment, his detachment slips into ownership. I don't panic. Other people break themselves. It's a small but revealing shift, showing not a man analyzing behavior, but one admitting his place in it. The silence that follows becomes its own kind of test, where both interviewer and subject measure each other's restraint. That moment exposes what lies beneath Daniel's calm, an obsession with control so complete that emotion itself becomes an instrument. The mask settles again, but now its cracks are visible, hinting at the deeper truths still hidden behind his practiced ease.
Chapter 4. The Echoes. Every case leaves behind echoes, not just in evidence or reports, but in the recollections of those who once believed they knew the person behind the crime. Daniel's story unfolds through these fragments: the detective who first met him at a fundraiser, the neighbors who called him quiet and kind, and the psychologist who described his empathy as imitation rather than feeling. Each remembered version of him is an echo, a reflection shaped by trust and perception. Beneath the surface charm lies meticulous observation, notes on people, habits, and weaknesses, all cataloged with unsettling precision. These echoes reveal how easily control can hide behind likability, and how a mask, when worn long enough, begins to resemble the truth itself.
Chapter 5. The Challenge. By the third day, the balance in the interview room changes. When Daniel listens to the recordings of others describing him, he doesn't react with emotion, but with calculation, as though dissecting each opinion for weakness. His words shift the focus away from himself, turning the conversation into a mirror. "You're studying yourself, not me," he says, exposing the vulnerability that comes with curiosity. This is his challenge: control through intellect, manipulation through calm. For Daniel, dominance isn't about aggression, it's about knowing what others will reveal in their attempt to understand him. In that moment, the interview becomes less about crime and more about power, about how easily empathy and inquiry can be twisted into tools for control. Chapter 6: The Training Ground. Before facing someone like Daniel, investigators are trained to navigate conversations where words are weapons and silence is strategy. In sterile rooms filled with case studies and behavioral diagrams, they learn how to listen without reacting, how to stay composed when manipulation feels like connection. The lessons are simple in theory: remain calm, stay neutral, never compete for control. But in practice, they test the limits of self-awareness. As Dr. Calloway explains, true composure can't be faked. A manipulator will sense it immediately. Over time, even professionals begin to mirror the cadence of the people they study, their empathy tested by exposure to minds built on deception. The recordings and reflections become their only anchors, reminders of who they are beneath the roles they play. As the narrator prepares to meet Daniel again, the challenge shifts inward, because the most dangerous manipulation isn't what's said aloud, but what starts to take root in your own thoughts.
Chapter 7: The Mirror. When Daniel shifts the conversation toward the interviewer, the dynamic quietly changes. His questions are simple but piercing. Why you? What are you looking for? And suddenly the focus turns inward. The interrogation becomes a reflection, testing how much curiosity can reveal about vulnerability. This is the essence of the mirror, when a manipulator stops defending and starts observing you instead. Every pause and question is designed to draw emotion, to make empathy feel like exposure. In that moment, Daniel isn't seeking confession. He's measuring understanding, turning human connection into a tool of control. The encounter leaves a lingering unease, proof that when you stare too long into another person's psychology, you risk catching a faint reflection of yourself staring back.
Chapter 8: Resonance. Over time, constant exposure to Daniel begins to leave subtle imprints. The narrator starts to notice small reflections, mirrored speech patterns, shared pauses, familiar phrasing. This phenomenon, known as emotional resonance, is empathy turned inward, where understanding another person's rhythm begins to blur the line between observer and subject. The danger lies not in adopting their thoughts, but in absorbing their logic, the quiet, methodical reasoning that makes detachment feel natural. As Dr. Calloway explains, this mimicry is a side effect of deep psychological engagement, a sign that empathy is trying to make sense of what it cannot feel. By the third week, the narrator hears it in their own voice. Controlled, precise, almost cold. What began as study has become reflection, a reminder that when you listen too closely to emptiness, sometimes it starts to echo back in your own tone.
Chapter 9: The Disconnect. Detachment arrives quietly, disguised as discipline. What begins as a method of control, keeping emotion at bay to stay objective, slowly becomes a habit, then a barrier. The narrator starts to notice the change. Rehearsed tone, careful pauses, and ease with silence that once felt unnatural. Other investigators describe it the same way: a gradual drift from empathy, a necessary distance that eventually feels permanent. Dr. Calloway calls it preservation, but even she admits it can harden into something colder. When Daniel remarks, "You're quieter," it's both observation and challenge, and the truth of it lingers.
The disconnect isn't between interviewer and subject anymore, it's inside the narrator, between compassion and control, between the self who listens and the one who no longer reacts. Understanding has come at a cost, and it sounds like silence.
Chapter 10. Closure. Closure in this world is never final. It's simply the moment you stop reaching for answers that no longer exist. The last conversation with Daniel brings no revelations, only a quiet acceptance that understanding does not undo what's been done. His final words, "People always want to know why, but why doesn't change anything," linger as a reminder that motives rarely bring peace, only perspective. In the aftermath, the narrator reviews the recordings, searching not for meaning in the dialogue, but in the silences between them, where the weight of human complexity settles. Talk with Psychopaths and Savages ends not with resolution, but with reflection, that empathy, even when confronted by emptiness, remains a choice. True closure isn't about answers, it's about holding on to compassion without losing yourself in the darkness you tried to understand.
In the end, the search for understanding turns inward. What began as an attempt to define the minds of psychopaths and savages becomes a study of the fragile balance within all of us, the thin line between empathy and detachment, between comprehension and judgment. Control, manipulation, and cruelty aren't born in isolation. They grow from the smallest compromises of conscience, the quiet erosion of feeling over time. The lessons from Daniel and others like him extend beyond the walls of the interview room. They reveal how easily the human mind can justify, adapt, and distance itself. True understanding, the narrator realizes, isn't about excusing or condemning. It's about recognizing that empathy, when kept intact, is our last defense against becoming what we study. The echoes of these conversations linger, not as darkness, but as a reminder that to look into the void and still choose compassion is what defines humanity at its most fragile and most resilient.